Somewhere in a mid-sized American city, in a two-bedroom apartment with a leaking faucet he still hadn't fixed, Marcus Feld was doing what Marcus Feld did every Tuesday night, microwaving a burrito and losing at online chess to a stranger named XXX underscore Grandmaster Kevin underscore XXX. He was 34. He worked in inventory logistics for a company that sold decorative garden gnomes. He had never been in a fight. He had never even raised his voice at a fight. And in exactly 11 days, his face would be pinned to the wall of every post office in the continental United States. This is the story of how Marcus Feld became the single most successful fugitive in the history of the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Not because he was dangerous, not because he was clever, but because the universe has a truly vicious sense of humor, and Marcus happened to be standing directly in its path. Rank 10. The paperwork guy. It started, as these things often do, with a spreadsheet. Marcus's company had a warehouse fire. Nothing suspicious, old wiring, bad luck, the usual. But 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had submitted an insurance form for a broken forklift, and in his haste to leave for lunch, he'd accidentally checked a box marked intentional damage instead of accidental damage. One flagged form, one overworked claims adjuster, one overzealous fraud investigator who had watched too many true crime documentaries and decided this was his moment. By the time anyone realized the checkbox was a simple mistake, Marcus's name had already been forwarded, through a chain of interdepartmental emails nobody read carefully, to a federal insurance fraud task force that happened to be building a broader arson case completely unrelated to him. Marcus didn't even know he was a suspect. He was still just a guy microwaving burritos. He appeared, briefly, at rank 10 on a regional watch bulletin. Nobody outside 3 tired federal employees noticed. Rank 9, the misunderstanding at the bank. 2 days later, Marcus went to his bank to dispute a $4.50 overdraft fee. Standard stuff. Except that morning, unbeknownst to him, the bank had received a federal notice, mistakenly addressed to a M. Feld at a similar address 2 streets over, instructing them to freeze suspicious accounts linked to the fraud investigation. Marcus's account got frozen by clerical error. He got upset. Not villain upset. More customer service hold music upset. He raised his voice exactly once. A nervous teller, who had also just watched a documentary about a different case entirely, hit the silent alarm. By the time 2 patrol officers arrived, Marcus had already left, not fleeing, just annoyed, heading to his car to call the bank's corporate line from the parking lot. The report that got filed described a man matching the description of an ongoing federal suspect who had become agitated and fled the scene upon police arrival. Every word of that sentence was technically true. None of it meant what it sounded like. Rank 9. Marcus, now sitting in his car eating a granola bar, has officially fled a bank. Rank 8. The gas station incident word does not travel fast in bureaucracy, until occasionally it travels very fast. A regional alert about a fraud suspect who fled a bank reached a gas station clerk 40 minutes later, right as Marcus pulled in to buy a lottery ticket and a bag of pretzels. The clerk recognized nothing about Marcus, specifically, but he recognized the description: average height, dark jacket, driving a grey sedan, because that description matched roughly 9 million men in the tri-state area, one of whom happened to be standing at his counter, holding a scratch-off ticket. The clerk called it in. Marcus, unaware he was now the subject of his second police report in one afternoon, drove home and watched a documentary about garden gnome manufacturing, because that is simply the kind of man Marcus was. Rank 8. 2 separate police departments now believe 2 separate versions of Marcus exist. Neither version has done anything wrong. Both versions are extremely wanted. Rank 7. The press release. Somewhere in a windowless office, a public information officer under pressure to show progress on the arson fraud case decided that 2 independent reports, the bank, the gas station, constituted a credible pattern of evasive behavior. A press release went out. It did not use Marcus's real name because nobody official had actually confirmed his real name yet. It used the phrase person of interest, believed to be operating under the alias associated with recent fraudulent claims. Local news picked it up. A sketch artist, working from two conflicting eyewitness descriptions, produced a composite image that looked like Marcus in the way a potato vaguely resembles a face. It was, somehow, close enough. Marcus watched this exact segment on the 11 o'clock news while eating cereal for dinner. He did not recognize himself. He thought, out loud, to his empty apartment, "That guy looks like he's having a rough week." Rank 7. Marcus feels sympathy for a sketch of himself. Rank 6. The accidental alibi. That wasn't desperate to clear the growing confusion around his frozen bank account. Marcus finally called the fraud task force directly. The number was, ironically, printed at the bottom of the same insurance form that started all of this. He got voicemail. He left a long, rambling, extremely honest message explaining the forklift, the checkbox, the overdraft fee, and his general confusion about why his card kept declining. He left his real name, his real address, his real phone number. To any reasonable listener, this voicemail was the single most exculpatory piece of evidence imaginable. An innocent man, confused and cooperative, trying to sort out a paperwork error. To the task force, exhausted, and now 3 reports deep into a narrative they'd already built, it sounded like something else entirely. A suspect taunting investigators by openly admitting knowledge of the case, using a burner-sounding rant, refusing to come in person. Nobody bothered to call the number back. It got logged as additional confirmation of suspect's awareness of ongoing investigation. Rank 6. Marcus's honesty has now been officially weaponized against him. Rank 5. The road trip that wasn't a road trip. Marcus, still blissfully unaware he had become a minor federal priority, decided to visit his sister 2 states away for her birthday. He packed a duffel bag. He bought gas with cash because his card was still frozen. He turned his phone off during the 11-hour drive because the battery was dying and he'd forgotten his charger. From a distance, this is indistinguishable from someone fleeing across state lines, going dark and paying cash to avoid a trail. Cell tower pings that should have shown Marcus's phone stopped abruptly. His card usage stopped abruptly. A financial analyst assigned to the case flagged this as consistent with deliberate evasion protocol. Marcus, meanwhile, arrived at his sister's house, ate cake, and fell asleep on her couch, watching a documentary about competitive lawn bowling. Rank 5. 2 states now have open files on a man who is, at this exact moment, snoring. Rank 4. The sister's neighbor. His sister's neighbor, a retired security guard named Gerald, who had far too much time and far too many crime podcasts in his life, noticed a grey sedan with out-of-state plates, parked outside for 3 days. Gerald had recently seen a regional news segment about a person of interest driving a similar vehicle. Gerald did what Gerald considered his civic duty. He took photos of the license plate and submitted a tip through an anonymous federal tip line, feeling, for the first time in years, genuinely useful. The plate matched. Of course it matched. It was Marcus's actual car, registered under his actual name. This should have resolved everything instantly. A simple registration lookup would have shown a man with no criminal history, no weapons record, no outstanding warrants beyond an unconfirmed fraud flag from a checkbox error. Instead, in the chaos of an active and expanding file, the plate match got logged as confirmed sighting of suspect at secondary location, evading capture in a border-adjacent state. Marcus was, at the time of this evasion, asleep in a guest bedroom with a nightlight shaped like a frog. Rank 4. Gerald has just become the most consequential retiree in America. Rank 3. The media spiral. By this point, the story had everything a slow news cycle craves. A mysterious suspect, multiple states, an alarming pattern of disappearances, and absolutely zero actual danger to anyone, which, paradoxically, made it more fascinating to cover, because nobody could explain what he'd actually done. Cable news ran the composite sketch under captions like, "Who is the Ghost Fugitive?" A true crime podcast recorded a 2-hour speculative episode titled The Gnome Warehouse Conspiracy, which correctly identified the Garden Gnome Company, but incorrectly assumed Marcus had burned it down for insurance money he never filed for. Marcus discovered all of this only when his sister showed him the podcast, laughing, assuming it was a hilarious coincidence that someone from his own industry was in the news. His exact words, upon realizing the ghost fugitive wore his jacket, drove his car, and worked at his company. Oh no, rank 3. Marcus has finally caught up to what everyone else already believes about him. Rank 2, the worst possible decision. Here is where Marcus, panicking for the first time in this entire ordeal, made the one choice that actually looked bad. Instead of walking into the nearest FBI field office and calmly explaining the checkbox, the overdraft, the road trip, and the frog nightlight, he panicked, borrowed his sister's car, and drove back home to sort things out himself, turning his phone off again along the way because he didn't want reporters calling. This is, definitionally, the single most suspicious thing an innocent man can do. He knew it wasn't wise, even as he was doing it. He just didn't know what else to do with a life that had turned into a true crime podcast overnight. Analysts watched a second vehicle, registered to his sister, cross the same state line his grey sedan had crossed 6 days earlier. The pattern, to a room full of exhausted professionals who had built an entire narrative around a checkbox, looked less like coincidence and more like a network. Rank 2. Marcus, for the first and only time, has done something that would look bad, even with full context. Rank 1. The most wanted man in America. The elevation to rank 1 didn't come from evidence. It came from momentum, a task force under public pressure, a media cycle demanding resolution, and a file so large by now that nobody left in the room had read it from the beginning. Only the summary, which by this point read like the plot of a very serious film starring a man who has never once broken a law. Marcus Feld, garden gnome logistics coordinator, owner of One Frog Nightlight, loser of 11 consecutive online chess matches to a stranger named Kevin, became the most searched name in the country. Vigilant citizens across 4 states reported sightings of him at gas stations, in grocery stores, and, memorably, at a regional gnome trade show he had, in fact, actually attended, for work, 3 months earlier, in a photo someone had dug up and mistaken for current. He turned himself in on a Thursday. He walked into the nearest field office, set his keys on the counter and said calmly, "I think there's been a mix-up about a checkbox." The entire case unravelled in 40 minutes. The forklift form, the overdraft fee, the nervous teller, the gas station clerk, Gerald. The frog nightlight entered, unbelievably, into an official case file as unidentified evidence, possible signal device, a phrase that would go on to define Marcus for the rest of his life, mostly as a joke he told at parties. Outro, the irony. Marcus Feld spent 11 days as the most dangerous fugitive in the country without ever once breaking a law, raising a weapon, or doing anything more aggressive than raising his voice at a bank teller about a $4.50 fee. He was, by every technical measure, the most successful person to ever top the FBI's most wanted list, because he evaded capture for over a week without trying to evade anything at all. He simply lived his ordinary, mildly unlucky life, while an entire bureaucratic machine built a criminal mastermind out of paperwork, coincidence, and one extremely proud retiree named Gerald. The gnome company sent him a fruit basket. The chess stranger Kevin finally lost a game to him the following Tuesday, and the frog nightlight sits, to this day, in an evidence storage locker, still labelled possible signal device.